So this is the latest horror film from A24, directed by Mark Anthony Green, who's a newcomer. This is his first feature. He's done a short film before. This stars Ayo Edebiri, a fan favorite around here, as Ariel, who's a young journalist working at a magazine. Um, she lives in a world where this huge pop star and very reclusive person played by John Malkovich has come out with a new album after 30 years in hiding. No one's seen him, no one's talked to him or interviewed him. A mysterious tape has been leaked, and that he's going to be he has a new album. It's ready. He's going to be inviting a select few people to his compound. For some reason I thought it was an island, but it's a compound, to come hear the music and experience life around him. Ayo Edebiri kind of very mysteriously gets an invite to to the annoyance of her boss, played by Murray Bartlett, who also goes. Juliette Lewis is like a talk show host who's a bit of a gossip columnist who gets invited on, a paparazzi person as well. And so they get to this compound and everything's very strange. It's very kind of midsummer, where it's not just like three people. There's a ton of people all dressed the same. It kind of looks like a cult, and there's people like exercising in the yard. There's people teaching kids painting, and it's one of these exercises where people are just they're too polite to say anything about the real weird stuff. There's a really gross scene kind of in at the beginning where they share this huge piece of bread and they just pass it down this table of like 20 people. And of course, that many people bites into a piece of bread. It kind of gets gross after a while, and everyone just does it, and no one wants to be rude. And also it's about cult of personality, because we're in the presence of this great artist and no one's seen him for long, and it's such a privilege to be here. And John Malkovich is just kind of scene chewing as Alfred Moretti for short. And he's into some sort of new age something or other. The religion, they call themselves levelists. We know something's not quite right, but everyone's kind of too starstruck to say anything. People start slowly disappearing, and bad things happen. It is a horror film as well. That is our setup. Zach, what'd you think?
So Opus has some problems, and it feels like a sharp swing at a directorial debut from Mark Anthony Green. He wrote and directed. This is his first real feature. He has one short film on his IMDb before this. Great first outing. But when you watch it, you're going to get sensations of things like The Menu or Midsommar, both of which are tragically just a little better at this formula than Opus is. It's very good. It's very funny. I think Opus actually has some like creative... There's something in the middle of it that I think is really good. But I just think the execution's poor. It's just a little too far-fetched. There's some elements that are a little too out of place, like a puppet show with Billie Holiday. And there's some stuff that just doesn't quite work. And it ends up being a little bit more like another one of Ayo Edebiri's projects, Theater Camp, than something more refined like The Menu or Ari Aster's Midsommar. Like it's this like getaway where all of these like rich people are going out and doing their thing and spending time. But like the actual gooey center at the heart of that like horror comedy dramedy, I think is a little lacking in Opus. And it's a bummer because I think it's sharp. I think it'll play great on streaming services. I think when people watch it at home, it'll do good. But we were talking about in the news about getting people to come out and get excited for these like mid-budget small features. And this one is just a tough one to get folks excited about because despite Malkovich and Edebiri putting out great work here, like it's just a little too fresh, a little too raw, I think, in a way that I don't think people are going to like.
Yeah, it feels like it needed a few more passes at the script. It feels like it has pacing problems, kind of drags a little bit in certain scenes. Certain scenes just feel like they go on too long. Like you have a good idea and then it kind of just doesn't go anywhere. And it's unclear what like the kind of message is behind this. Like it's kind of a cult of personality where people are kind of worshiping this person and won't tell him no because of who he is. But then I'm not sure what else the film was trying to say. The performances are really strong. Like Ayo Edebiri is always a delight. She's so funny all the time, and she does a great job. As she's the one person who's not mesmerized by Moretti because she's, I think, partially like she's a younger person.'s a Gen Z person, and she's like, I don't know who this is, some old guy who's coming out. So she's just kind of skeptical of the whole thing. The other thing is like she's not an established person like these other people. She's a journalist trying to make her mark, trying to get on bigger stories, and she doesn't have any of like the money, the prestige. Like she's still worried about just paying her bills and things. So she's just much more grounded than everyone else in the film. But she's a delight. John Malkovich is having a lot of fun with his character. He's got a lot of really great, outrageous outfits. Has some good monologues. I think the performances are great. It's just the material needed some refinement.
Yeah, it's not an issue of ideology, I don't think. I think our characters come from smart places. I think there's a good heart at the center of this movie. It's just an issue of execution. Ayo Edebiri's character, Ariel Ecton, is like stunningly middle of the road. That she has this great scene in a Chinese restaurant with her main squeeze boyfriend, I guess, friend at the beginning of the movie, where he explains to her that she's just very middle. She was born middle class, brought up middle class, never had any real tragedy. She's got two good parents. She's got a good paying job. But she lacks experience, and experience drives perspective, and perspective is the really important thing behind opinion. And if she doesn't get out of her shell and doesn't go out and go do new things, then she's never going to gain the perspective to have strong enough opinions to write real articles and be a real journalist like she wants to. It's great. That's actually really meaningful and really thoughtful. And I think that's actually something really great from writer-director Mark Anthony Green. Additionally, Moretti, John Malkovich's character, has created this sort of religion called levelism out there in the desert, where the idea is that you and your friends and all the people who follow levelism all follow these devout beliefs and ultimately reach a new place of creativity where you can break into like the ultimate creative to be able to produce anything from your mind into the real world. Like, it's abstract, and that's where it starts to get clunky. But the idea of a religion built around creativity, like that an artist would create at their compound, is kind of interesting. And like a young reporter going out and trying to figure that out and like stumbling into horror stuff along the way is fascinating, I think, in a way that's engaging. The problem is like a lot of the violence happens off screen, and there's not even that much violence, honestly. And it just kind of seems like odd tension, and characters don't bring it up till it's like way too late. And then they're like, oh, hey, what's going on around here? And half the cast still doesn't believe it. Oh, Ariel, you're talking crazy talk. Nothing's going on out here. So they took our phones at the entrance. So what? Like, it's just difficult for the audience to get on board. Andy talked about with single white female setup fatigue. A little bit of setup fatigue in Opus. Not a lot. We get out to the compound pretty fast, but like, everybody's seen the trailers walking into Opus knowing something's going on here. So the longer we wait to get to the point of what that something is, the more bored your audience gets. And like, it's just I don't know. It's a simple thing.
Yeah, it's less than the sum of its parts because the setup is interesting. The performances are good. We do get some kind of good moments of tension and laughter, and the climax is really good. Like, that's where, again, finally the action kind of picks up. It just needed a little bit more refinement. It did need to be more efficient. We needed to get there sooner. 90 minutes would have probably been better. But I was happy to, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the Electric State. I was just glad to see a movie that was clearly made for people to see in the theater. Like, we get some nice cinematography. We have some nice landscape shots and some interesting things there. It's just like, oh my gosh, it's like when we watch Final Destination, and that those first few movies are really built for the theatrical experience, and the later ones less so.
Yeah, I think Green is taking a lot of big creative swings here. There's a drone shot in the opening of this movie, in like the first act, that is genuinely incredible. When the bus arrives at this like compound, we start on the ground with what looks like a camera, and then as we pull back from this bus, we just keep going up into the sky more and more. And it's actually, if you watch on YouTube, I just had it on screen. Small world. And it just keeps going up into the sky and lifting above this huge desert compound. It's great. I'm like, oh my God, that's, I mean, I don't want to say it's like a real movie, but like very theatrical. That's the kind of action I'm looking for. Malkovich writhing around on the ground, like acting for all of his goofy followers. Tons of fun. Creepy followers all wearing like denim blue with their heads shaved and stuff. Like, good stuff. But like, I just think the conversation happening, like between like, what is your creative opus, and this artist who's been out in the desert for like 35 years, and this young reporter who's trying to kind of figure it out, like that bit is just a little like clunky. That handshake just doesn't end up being as smooth as I think you need for it to carry through. But yeah, Malkovich and Edebiri are doing great work. They're both fantastic. Also, Amber Midthunder's in this. We didn't talk about that at
Yeah,
all. Probably should mention her.
two movies,
Yeah,
this weekend.
and Novocaine. It's the year of Amber. Like, what are we doing here? She's barely in the trailer. Love her. I hope she gets more work. She's a small part in this, but there are no small parts, and Amber does a good job with it, I think.
Yeah, like I said, the performances are probably the strongest part. It's just not quite as creepy enough. There's not enough questioning about things going wrong, which I think is always a struggle in movies like this. I mean, Midsummer, as much as I love that movie, has a little bit of that problem too. It's like, oh, people are disappearing. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Happens all the time. So there's a little bit of that. Like, we need people to question what's going on a little bit more. I think that's all I got.
I know. I'm running out of gas on it too. Andy, would you recommend Opus?
I would say soft pass on this. Save it for streaming. It's one of these movies that probably will and would have played better on a streamer. Anyways, that's always the tough thing with a mid-budget film, is getting people excited about it. But the performances are strong, the setup and the initial idea are interesting. It kind of loses its way a little bit along the way. It's a little unfocused narratively, but it's okay, and we get some decent scares by the end. So save it for streaming.
Yeah, I think Opus, like most A24 features, will have its audience. I don't think that's for everybody, though. I think if you watch it, like, I think it's better than most junky A24 movies, but it's certainly not reaching like the level of quality that you hope for. It's like a mid Ghibli movie. You know what I mean? Not one of the best ones, not one of the worst ones. I think if you're creatively stuck, maybe if you're looking for something to kind of get you out of a rut, maybe you had a little bit of writer's block or artist block, something like that. Like Opus might be the thing to kick you out of it, because it's got some thoughts on creation and making something and leaving a legacy and how audiences perceive your work versus how you as an artist perceive it, but it's not very thick. It's not too dense. It's still pretty surface. And I think it's fun in that way, but not theatrical. I think streaming's just fine. And with that, we got to move on to our next segment. We got to talk about some trailers. Andy, what do we typically call this segment?
It's time for the trailer park.
All right, and I'm first. Excuse